shift for a police officer.
It started out as nothing.
It was innocuous. It was a little crime.
Can quickly take an extraordinary turn.
A simple traffic stop went stratospheric within 2 minutes.
Speed is 70 miles an hour.
He's outside the petrol station fighting with another male.
A routine case.
You can start off with something and it can turn into something completely different.
Taser! Taser! I'll hear from you!
Can suddenly spiral into a serious incident.
Then it switched. He locked the door. She knew that something was very, very wrong here.
Stand by, I think we're going to have a decamp. One got out with a baseball bat. There's a ton of cannabis in the car.
They were literally on a rampage.
Sometimes the most minor crimes.
I was looking for a stolen quad bike, found a lot more.
Can crack major cases.
We were now possibly looking at a serial killer.
Today on Big Little Crimes, a single dodgy text exposes a massive scam, leaving a trail of victims.
Hundreds of different fraudsters who are committing fraud against hundreds of different victims.
A local village complaint leads to an international hunt for a con woman claiming to have friends in high places.
She said that she was travelling across the world, seeing lots of political figures, mixing with Hollywood celebrities.
But first, an everyday burglary exposes drug dealers blighting a community and sparks the downfall of a family-run criminal empire.
This is a bigger conspiracy rather than just one-off events.
Having your home ransacked and property stolen is many people's worst nightmare. In the UK, a burglary occurs on average every 2 minutes. But few turn out to be the first step in bringing down a multi-million-pound drug-dealing conspiracy. But that's just what happened following a break-in in Grimsby.
We investigate these similar crimes on a daily basis, really, so there was nothing untoward about it.
It's a routine job for DS Darren Gray. It's crucial he gets to work quickly in the so-called golden hour.
When we investigate offences such as burglary, there's a number of golden hour inquiry principles that we follow. It was through CCTV inquiries that were carried out that initially led to the identification of the suspect and obviously led to his arrest from there.
Arresting a suspect so quickly is a great result. Police also seize the man's phone. And what they find is about to take this case to a whole new level.
During the course of examining his mobile phone, it became apparent that he was involved in other offences, namely drug supply.
Darren has a new and even more serious investigation on his hands. A specialist is brought in to decode text messages on the seized phone.
They were able to indicate that the controller of the mobile phone was involved in the supply of heroin and crack cocaine.
The suspect is charged with offering to supply Class A drugs. What started as a domestic burglary has bagged police a local drug dealer. A few weeks later, in a separate incident, another arrest is made when police stop a suspicious car.
They detained a male who was the lone occupant of the vehicle. A large amount of cash, believed to be approximately £10,000, was found within the vehicle.
The man is identified as Joshua Hendry, a known criminal from Merseyside.
The intelligence suggests that Joshua Hendry was coming into Grimsby for the purpose of drug supply.
He's released under investigation. Police also get to work on his mobile phone. It's the second serious drug arrest in a matter of days. But could the two be connected? Darren knows the arrests are a sign that the local drugs trade is growing. The focus of his investigation now shifts to a notorious Grimsby hotspot, known to be a big part of the problem.
This place is called Gas Alley, a busy area for what we believe to be was drug dealing. On occasions when we was coming down here for proactive patrols, you quite regularly see 10 to 15 known drug users congregating within this alley waiting for the drug suppliers to turn up. We saw at times some interaction with who we believe to be dealers as well.
Sure enough, Darren and the team soon get a hit.
It was here that we'd seen a couple of individuals that we suspected of being involved in drug supply, subsequently arrested them at the end of the alley, which then led to a search at a nearby premise where we recovered over £11,000 worth of crack and heroin and over £10,000 worth of cash from that location as well.
The huge seizure has taken thousands of pounds worth of drugs and several dealers off the streets of Grimsby.
Members of the public who before had voiced their concerns as to what was going on, they were now saying to us that could see the benefits of the activity that had been undertaken by the team.
But they're not finished yet.
When we was frequenting the areas where the drug supply was occurring and seeing the same individuals time and time again at these locations, and we suspected them of being involved in the drug supply.
Police are regularly spotting dealers who aren't from their patch. Darren decides it's time to strike again.
We executed a drugs warrant at an address in Grimsby. Intelligence was coming to us to say that was involved in drug supply. And one of the individuals we found was Josh Hendry.
It's the same man from Liverpool, recently arrested with £10,000 in his car. And he's not the only one who catches Darren's eye.
One of the other individuals that had been found in the location as well, he was an individual from the Merseyside area that we'd seen time and time again within the drug dealing hotspots.
It's another new infiltrator of the Grimsby drug scene. Could Darren's local investigation have exposed a much bigger national conspiracy?
Team and I started to think that a number of these events were possibly connected. We started to look at it and think, well, actually, we think this is a bigger conspiracy rather than just one-off events.
Later, as the net closes in on the ringleaders, Darren discovers they're keeping it in the family. In our second case today, a routine scam becomes a hunt for a kingpin, helping fraudsters empty thousands of bank accounts.
A bad day is going home knowing that a criminal was still out there defrauding members of the public. These investigations, they take time to identify who the subjects are that are responsible.
For Detective Inspector David Vint of the Dedicated Card and Payment Crime Unit, patience is key when it comes to catching fraudsters. But when a very ordinary crime landed on his desk in London, he was expecting a quick outcome.
This initially came on our radar by the banks coming to us and letting us know that their customers had been receiving text messages purporting to be from trusted organisations. So one of the customers, they had a text message purporting to be from HMRC.
The man receives a message claiming to be from the government tax office. It says he owes £250 on his tax bill.
They clicked on the link within that text message, and that link took them to a direct spoof of the HMRC website, so that recipient believes they are passing with their information on a genuine website. However, it's not, and that website is under the control of fraudsters.
Tricked by what he thought was a genuine message, the worried pensioner immediately parted with his cash. He's the latest victim of what's known as smishing, a routine crime which can have devastating consequences.
So the smishing scam works by fraudsters sending out bulk text messages. The recipient of the text message clicks on that web link, and that spoofed website will request their personal information, so names, dates of births, passwords, and also financial information, and that's then harvested by fraudsters and used to commit crime against individuals' accounts.
He's only aware of one victim so far, but David's instinct tells him this is unlikely to be an isolated case. It could be a sign of something much larger.
Criminals are always alive to current affairs, and they use these to prey on individuals. at the start of the pandemic, texts were being sent out from HMRC because people were entitled to money. But as a result of that, it would mean that more people would then click on those links, and then individuals committed crime on their accounts.
Any one of us can click on a link from what we think is a trusted source and play straight into the fraudster's hands.
We reviewed whether or not this was a wider issue. At that point, we identified there was a huge amount of victims across the UK that were falling foul to these smishing frauds.
There have been many more reports from banks and their customers about the bogus texts. And this has now become a much bigger UK-wide investigation. The tax texts are just the tip of the iceberg. Text message scams, claiming to be from other trusted organisations, have also been used to exploit the way people were behaving during the pandemic.
Text messages were being sent out purporting to be from the NHS. That was in relation to the COVID-19 vaccination rollout. So people were clicking on the links to determine in their heads whether or not they were eligible for the vaccination. And that then settled on the delivery hook, where more and more people were getting items delivered to their home addresses. So more and more people were expecting deliveries. This threat is constantly evolving by criminals.
There are several different bogus messages, but they all have one thing in common: stealing people's cash. And it doesn't always end there.
What we have found is smishing is a precursor to the next crime. That then leads us on to phase 2. At phase 2, it's about accessing your personal and your financial information to commit fraud against you. Whenever a transaction or a transfer is conducted on an account that is unexpected, your bank's own security measures will kick in, and it will request further authentication to show that that payment is allowed by the account holder. The way that they do that is by sending a one-time password to the genuine account holder's mobile phone.
The password request is usually bad news for the fraudsters. It alerts the account holder someone is trying to make a payment from their account. But through this case, David's discovered that thanks to a new computer program, the crooks have found a way to keep on conning.
This automated calling service will call the victim purporting to be from their own bank. It will state that there's been an unauthorised transaction on their account, and it will request that one-time password to prevent fraud from happening. That's all a lie. The fraudster is after that one-time password, so they can in fact take full control of your bank account.
Once they have control, the criminals are not only after your cash.
They would take out credit agreements and loan agreements in people's names. They would transfer all of that victim's money away from the victim's account into accounts under their control.
No bank would ever call a customer to ask for a one-time password. So, what looked like one victim being conned out of his cash has actually turned out to be thousands more people caught out by this sophisticated scam. Many have lost their life savings. David needs to catch whoever's behind the fraud, and fast.
To identify the real person behind the smishing text messages, it's all about the partnerships we have with the telephone networks that can identify where the text messages are being sent from and who's sending them.
It's a painstaking task. David's determined to follow the trail, and where it leads is about to blow the investigation wide open.
We identified 50 suspects who were sending out these text messages, and they were then sending out spam messages to thousands and thousands of people, trying to capture their personal information so they could commit fraud.
Later, the race is on to identify the mastermind behind this major crime sweeping the country.
There was someone higher up this chain of criminality who was causing more harm and that we really needed to target.
In our first two cases, police have lots of suspects in their sights. But our next one involves a career criminal who prefers flying solo. Hollywood, a glamorous world of money, power, and A-list movie stars. It's a million miles away from the sleepy Cotswolds. So, when the two worlds collided on Detective Sergeant Billy Walsh's desk one morning, he was hoping for a taste of the action.
It's definitely one of the jobs I remember. It's just so many different aspects to it. Things that I'd never actually had to do before and seen before.
The case starts with a very run-of-the-mill crime report at a village station.
So the lady went into the front reception and reported that she had invested in a scheme. It was for a few £1,000s. She said that the lady who she gave the money to had essentially done a runner and gone out of the country, and that she was unable to make contact with her and was unable to get her money back. So the police, with her assistance, went to the address where the lady had been renting, which was in Shipton under Wychwood.
This isn't exactly a hotbed of crime.
Shipton under Wychwood is your quintessential village in the Cotswolds. Very quiet, secluded area. The police attended and spoke to the landlady, and it turned out that the suspect no longer lived at the address. However, she had left a box of paperwork.
The complaint was about money invested in a charitable scheme that had evaporated, along with the woman.
And they looked inside the box and they found lots of literature purporting to be a humanitarian worldwide project, and it was designed to lend money to governments for quick-time loans at an increased interest rate. And then they would pay that money back, and the profit which they got from that was the profit that the investors would make.
They also find evidence that the crime might not be a one-off.
Once the officers had looked through that paperwork, it became very evident that it was a lot more money than just a few £1,000s.
The case is growing. Police discover pages and pages of investors, all potential victims of the fraudster.
It was apparent there was probably around about 20 victims, just in relation to what we found in the box. I would imagine there was many, many more.
A routine case at a Cotswolds cop shop is about to become a worldwide investigation. Police make contact with investors as far afield as Fiji, New Zealand, and North America.
When the officers spoke to some of these witnesses, it was also clear that she appeared to be targeting the more elderly people. There was lots of promises of money that they were going to get in return. Unfortunately, it was the same tale from each witness. You know, they were very, very upset, understandably, because they'd lost their life savings, their pensions. It was clear that this had been going on for many, many years.
It's a long way from a single report of fraud. Police are now trying to track down a despicable conwoman, whom they suspect may have stolen millions. But how is she convincing so many innocent people to trust her? Billy does some more digging and discovers a tale of deception so elaborate it could be straight out of a movie.
The lady was very convincing because she said that she was travelling across the world, seeing lots of political figures, dignitaries, famous people. Also, she said that she was mixing with Hollywood celebrities such as Denzel Washington and Kristen Scott Thomas, to name a few. So this is some of the notes that suspect has written in paperwork recovered from the box. And then you can see there that there's a number of people named on here and then highlighted as Hillary Clinton.
It's all a work of fiction, cleverly designed to legitimize the fraudster. She's never rubbed shoulders with any of these people. But she's certainly been living the high life, traveling the world, all paid for with the savings of the pensioners she's hoodwinked.
So this is a typical hotel receipt for a 5-star hotel. This particular one, the room cost £10,000 for 25 nights, £6,000 in expenses. This is what she was doing for years and years. So she would go to the hotel, she'd spend a long time there, and then when it came to paying the bill, she would ask investors to pay for her hotel bill and promising to pay the money back, but she never did.
Billy knows where this brazen fraudster has been, but he needs to find out where she is now, and there's very little to go on.
We've been given a name by the witness as to who she gave the money to. The difficulty we had was that there didn't appear to be any digital footprint in relation to the lady. The only contact she ever made with anyone was, or appeared to be, via email, which is very, very rarely. I kind of made it my mission to try and track her down and sort of get some form of justice for these victims.
A lot of victims have come forward from across the globe. This wasn't just one victim in a sleepy Cotswolds village. Retirement plans have been ruined, and people left massively out of pocket. Finally, some have decided to take action.
One of the witnesses had set up a website which was about the lady saying she was a fraudster, and for them to make some comments on the website. As it happened, there was quite a few people that made comment on that website. Whilst I was investigating it, a person said that she actually thought that she knew where the lady was. She had recently contacted one of the victims promising to pay back some of the money. So I looked at the email address and we were able to determine from her IP address she was in Nice.
The unique IP address gives Billy the suspect's exact location in France.
So now we had enough to go to the court to obtain a European arrest warrant.
Will the police finally be able to catch this lifelong fraudster? It's an anxious wait for Billy.
I got a phone call and they told me that the lady had been apprehended and arrested in France, and it was fantastic. It was absolutely brilliant. Been waiting a long time for her to be arrested.
After 8 years of meticulous investigation, the case goes to trial. The suspect is found guilty of 6 counts of fraud, 1 charge of obtaining money by deception, and 5 counts of fraud by false representation. She's jailed for 3 years and 4 months for a fraud totaling nearly £200,000. The heartless con woman behind a scam that's caused so much financial and emotional pain to her victims is finally behind bars.
From the initial complaint, when the lady came in, reporting that she had invested some money into a scheme, I don't think for 1 minute anyone could have imagined just how big this investigation was going to go and where it took the investigation across the world.
Back in Grimsby, what started as a small burglary case has sparked a series of big drug busts. DS Darren Gray is convinced the recent arrests of some local dealers could be connected to a national drugs operation, led by some new major players.
As the investigation was progressing, we identified a number of individuals from the Merseyside and the Cheshire area.
One of those new faces is Liverpool drug dealer Joshua Hendry. He's suspected of bringing in drugs to be sold in Grimsby, but pleads not guilty to conspiracy to supply cocaine.
During the course of the trial, Josh Hendry actually fled the country and went to Spain. He was sentenced to 10 years in his absence.
He's on the run. It's a massive setback, but Darren's convinced Hendry has left a wider conspiracy behind. His focus shifts to proving there is a connection between the suspects arrested in the recent drug raids.
It was at this point where we sat down and actually said there's got to be some clear links between these different incidents, and started to review all the telephones that had been recovered. There was 56 mobile phones that had been seized from the suspects or from properties. There was thousands of lines of data within the phones, such as text messages, WhatsApp messages, telephone calls that we needed to look at to show the clear links between the different suspects in what would be the conspiracy moving forward.
The phones could be key to unlocking the crime. In total, police analyse over 400,000 items of data. Patterns emerge, showing the same numbers communicating with one another.
When we was actually reviewing the data stored within the phones, you could see the conversations that was being had, and there was a number that related to drug supply. It became apparent that there was individuals that were residing in the Warrington area and the Liverpool area, and it was those individuals that we believe they were responsible for actually running the operation.
Darren and the team have proven a national link that goes well beyond local small-time drug dealers. They're now on the trail of an organised criminal gang and need to work out who's using each number.
We'd carry out inquiries with regards to the billing data that had been obtained for those numbers, and once we could show whose telephone number that was, we could then say who was actually responsible for contacting who.
One of the phones was regularly calling a car hire firm. Could this be the breakthrough they're looking for?
We contacted the car hire company just to see who held that phone number on their records, and one that became apparent was that of Josh Hendry.
It's the Liverpool man charged with supplying drugs in Grimsby and now on the run in Spain. What started with a minor house burglary has led to police piecing together a major drug-dealing ring. They know the name of one man they suspect to be at the top of the chain, but they need to find the other ringleaders.
It quickly developed where we could show what was believed to be a hierarchy between certain individuals within the conspiracy. So there was a number of telephone numbers that were attributed to Joshua Hendry, Scott Hendry, and Leslie A. which was the mum of Scott and Joshua Hendry. We were saying that Leslie A. Joshua Hendry and his brother, Scott Hendry, were at the top of the hierarchy.
This is a family affair. And the case bears all the hallmarks of County Line's drug dealing.
County Line is predominantly an organised crime group that are in one part of the country and export drugs into another part of the country, such as small towns or villages, and they predominantly use a mobile phone to sell the drugs.
County Line's gangs have a phone number that drug users can call. It's known as the graft phone because of the amount of work it does, and can be worth as much as £30,000 a week to the dealers.
The graft number itself was often located either in the Liverpool vicinity or the Warrington vicinity, and again that gave us cause to think that it was either one of the Hendry brothers or Leslie A. that was operating the graft phone from those areas.
But is that graft phone connected to the mobile seized when they arrested the Grimsby dealers?
And the common denominator that I could see upon reviewing the phones was the graft number that popped up on the phones time and time again.
The local drug dealers, including the burglary suspect who sparked the investigation, have all been in contact with the graft phone. Darren now knows who's controlling the drug supply and who is selling them on.
We identified who we believed to be a courier, and the courier went by a nickname of the Greek, and we was able to obtain telephone data of who we believed to be the Greek. He was conveying Class A drugs from Liverpool area into Grimsby and then taking the money which had been the proceeds of the drug supplied back to Liverpool.
The hunt for the mystery man known as the Greek begins.
We was actually able to identify that he was coming in via a train on occasions. We was able to identify which train stations he was actually travelling from in Liverpool and to over in Grimsby. So this gave us cause to go and have a look at the CCTV footage from both locations.
There are hours of footage to look at, but soon they get a breakthrough.
We provided Merseyside Police with an image, and they confirmed that the Greek was in fact a male by the name of Andreas Vassou from the Liverpool area.
Darren has now pieced together how each stage of this complex county lines outfit operates. It's time to bring the gang in.
This is Catherine Street in Grimsby. This is where the police have managed to detain the Greek. He indicated to officers that there was a large amount of drugs in, that the drugs belonged to him. Immediately, the doors were put through at the address in Warrington and at the address in Liverpool. At the Warrington address where Scott Hendry was located and detained, there was a large amount of cash that was found. 3 of the handsets that were recovered from the home address of Leslie A. Toome were used during the course of the conspiracy, and the handset that was actually being used on that day as the graph phone, it was live at that time and it was calling as police officers entered the property.
After 18 months of painstaking work, the team has managed to bring a major drugs gang to its knees.
It was a very successful day. We'd obviously recovered a large amount of drugs. The only other part outstanding as such was Joshua Hendry.
He's been on the international most wanted list since he fled the country during his trial. There's been no sign of him until now.
Within 24 hours, there was an off-duty officer that was over in Spain, actually saw Mr. Hendry, realised it was Mr. Hendry from the images that he'd seen, and obviously Josh Hendry was detained at that point and then extradited to the UK.
It's the last piece of the jigsaw. Police have taken down all the major players whose drugs trade had in just 18 months netted them a fortune.
It was a large-scale operation. The overall value was £1.38 million.
Found guilty of conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, Andres Vassou receives 8 years in jail. Scott Hendry gets 14 years, and Leslie A. Toome, 11. Joshua Hendry won't be released from prison for more than 15 years. What started with a minor break-in has taken down Grimsby's growing drugs menace and ended up with police smashing a national drugs ring.
It was an excellent result. Looking at the burglary initially, we can't believe how big it actually developed from that telephone, and now we know that that number that was controlling a much bigger operation. I think it's the biggest operation that I'll be involved in the length of my policing career.
We're heading to the capital to wrap up our final case, where a minor fraud has uncovered thousands of victims of a major scam. DI David Vint is in the midst of one of the biggest cases of his career. A nationwide investigation has led to the arrests of 50 fraudsters, all accused of preying on innocent people using smishing texts to steal their cash.
These 50 individuals had various different levels of previous involvement with law enforcement. Some were career fraudsters, some were young lads just dipping their toes into the world of fraud. No two were the same, so some of the suspects, maybe they gained £200–300 in terms of the benefit that they obtained as a result of sending out these text messages. Some were a lot more sophisticated, so they used that personal information to get full access to people's accounts, and they would make hundreds of thousands of pounds.
It's a staggering amount of fraud with thousands of victims. David has never had so many suspects all accused of the same crime. Could he have smashed a criminal gang?
When we investigated these 50 individuals, we kept an open mind in relation to whether or not they would be working alone or whether or not there were other individuals involved. And that required the painstaking review of all of their digital material. We've identified that these were individuals that were linked via encrypted forums. So we gained access to phones, laptops. We identified that individuals were communicating with each other on encrypted messaging sites. Although they act alone and they commit offences alone, what we often find is they do share methodology within a network of fraudsters, what hooks victims are more likely to fall for.
What they all have in common is that they're all using the same software to bypass banking security systems. This could be the key to linking the huge network of criminals. But they're all keeping quiet about where it comes from.
We didn't gain a huge amount of information from those interviews. So we had to rely on our own investigation to identify whether or not there was anyone who was controlling these 50 individuals or who was higher up that chain of criminality.
David and the team examined digital evidence seized from the suspects. It's a painstaking task. Soon, they have a breakthrough. The team discover who the mystery figure is, cashing in by selling them the software.
We identified an online pseudonym known as Yahoozy, who was giving them advice and selling them with a one-time password bot. Yahoozy's role within this wasn't to commit fraud against individuals' bank accounts. It was to supply the tool to allow others to do so. They were paying $700 a month, and that was for a monthly subscription to this bot service. So he was selling this tool to hundreds of different fraudsters who were all then committing fraud against hundreds of different victims. An awful lot of money was made by the individual selling this bot.
It's a major breakthrough. Finding Yahoozy is now the key to cracking the case.
At that point, we identified that there was someone higher up this chain of criminality who was causing more harm and that we really needed to target.
Tracking them down won't be easy. Yahoozy operates in a secret online world. But have they left a trace?
The next phase of this investigation was to find out where these $700 payments were going to and identify the individual responsible for this crime.
David looks through the 50 suspects' seized laptops and phones. He discovers that the fraudsters pay for the illegal software using a legal cryptocurrency.
Cryptocurrency is just a digital currency. It works in the same way as pounds, dollars. You can make payments with cryptocurrency. Crypto transactions are anonymous by their very nature. You don't have the benefit of knowing who is in control of a bank account or whose name that bank account is in the name of. You've got to try and work with online wallets and try and establish who is behind those.
Yahoozi's made a massive amount of money. David's certain they must have spent it somewhere.
We have to look for the specific locations where that cryptocurrency was cashed out into real-world assets. So how was the criminal using all of those different $700 payments to fund their own criminal lifestyle? These were the points that we then had to exploit to identify who was responsible for this crime.
The team have been working day and night for months. The pressure to bring in the mystery kingpin is growing.
Knowing that there is an individual out there still committing crime against members of the public, that causes a huge amount of frustration. But it's that frustration that is then used to really harness and galvanise the team to identify who is responsible and what can we do collectively to take this individual out.
They're determined to crack the case. Soon, they have a breakthrough. Yahoozi's been shopping, and they've used a crypto credit card. David scours CCTV to see if they've been caught on camera.
We identified that the same individual in the same vehicle kept popping up each time these criminal proceeds were cashed out. And we identified that this individual was Timmy IG.
The man behind Yahoozi has been unmasked, and now police can track down his address.
We waited for Timmy in his underground car park. We made sure that we had the best possible chance of obtaining that key digital evidence. So when he went to leave his premises, he was arrested. And the reason for this is to make sure that we give ourselves the best possible chance of capturing Timmy whilst he's got his devices on him, his laptops, his mobile phones. And at that point, we simultaneously executed entry into his home address to seize the rest of the key evidence.
It's taken months to find him. David finally has his prime suspect.
When we arrested Timmy, he was driving a brand new Range Rover. He clearly was a wealthy man. He had a Rolex on his wrist, a lot of expensive jewellery. And then when we executed the warrant in his flat, it was clear that he had an awful lot of money. He clearly had a significant amount of disposable income to be able to afford the lifestyle that he was living. He had no discernible legitimate income, so he hadn't paid taxes in 4 years, but he was clearly living a very lavish lifestyle.
A lifestyle funded through crime. David discovers the suspect has earned over £1 million from selling illegal software to more than 1,000 fraudsters. But what does he have to say about where the money came from?
Timmy IG was interviewed and he gave us no answers in terms of his involvement within this criminality.
Timmy IG is saying nothing, but he's left a trail of digital evidence that speaks volumes.
The amount of devices seized paints a picture in terms of the scale of Timmy's criminality. By arresting Timmy IG and seizing all of his digital evidence, we were able not only to detain an individual responsible for committing a serious crime, but we were also able to take that bot offline to prevent others from becoming victims of crime.
Timmy IG is charged with money laundering and supplying materials for fraud. He pleads guilty and is sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. The 50 people arrested for the smishing fraud were given sentences up to 4 years.
This was incredibly important for my team. Bearing in mind this whole investigation originated from that single text message, to then identify the fraudsters behind sending those text messages Then to identify the organised criminals above those was of significance to the team, and it really shows how when we work together we can take out serious criminality.
From the 9-1, switch that over, that's the young blonde. I was at the West Coast, now I'm in the East Coast. Saw you